In the beginning, there was the motherboard, the backbone of every computer system, and it had nothing on it to interface but a bunch of slots and a keyboard port. If you wanted to add a floppy, a hard drive, a printer, you had to put a Super I/O card on it. After that, they started integrating the I/O into the board. And soon after that, they added on the audio. And then one day, on a miniaturized board, they put video. And that seemed revolutionary at the time. These things are all normal to us now, but then there's this little guy who has integrated everything, including the processor and the RAM. One of the first things we notice about this guy is how pretty and purple it is. That's definitely a more odd color to see a motherboard, especially these days. They all seem to go black. Once upon a time, MSI graced us with red motherboards, and that was pretty cool. Definitely a change from the basic green and the brown and the crap that existed once upon a time. This is an ECS or Elite Group K7SEM. And yeah, it's a completely integrated motherboard. The processor is soldered right on. There's no socket on that guy, and there's even RAM chips on there. Now, I've been doing computers a while, and I knew these existed, especially in the small, really small form factor space, but in a typical standard micro ATX form factor, that's a little bit less common. This guy features an AMD Duron 1800 plus processor. And typical with the naming schemes back then, it's actually only 1200 megahertz. And it also features 256 megabytes of RAM. So, I don't know, that was kind of nice. This board was made in 2003, so I guess 256 was okay, but not full out. It has an AGP port, which I presume is a 4X and 2 PCI slots. And then on the top is something I think it was called an AMR port. I can't remember. It was proprietary for modems and other similar items of that, probably a network card. On the back plane, the I/O is the usual affair. We have our basic audio, game port, parallel, COM port. There's our VGA, USB 1.1, and a 10100 LAN. Of course, you have front panel audio and another USB inside. Now, ECS is funny because they were kind of a joke brand at the time, or at least a joke brand among enthusiasts. No enthusiasts took ECS seriously. They were regarded as being a lower end discount brand. But considering the age of this board and the fact that in my testings, it still works perfectly fine, maybe they had more quality than we thought. The chipset is also Oddball. It's made by a company called SIS, S-I-S. And I know that sounds rather sus, but SIS was a thing once upon a time. A more higher end board would have a VIA chipset. And both of these kind of predate when AMD and Nvidia were making chipsets. Yeah, Nvidia made chipsets. Intel always made chipsets. They made them back then too, but if you had an AMD processor, it was either VIA or SIS back in these days. At one point, I was building a new system for someone, and I reused their case and power supply and other random bits, and this was the board I pulled out of it. And instead of flipping it or scrapping it like I may have done to a board at the time, I kept it. Half because it looks cool, and half because it was unique in that the RAM and the chip were built on, but I've never seriously used it for anything before. It's just sat in storage. But now, I'm gonna build on it. The only thing we really have to add to this thing to get it going is, well, nothing. We don't really have to add anything, but of course we're gonna max out the RAM at the very least. What I found surprising about this guy is even for the era, I could have sworn DDR was a thing back then, but no. It uses a PC 133. This appears to have been purchased from NCIX, probably predates Linus. So I'm guessing you're not gonna have the fastest RAM bandwidth, and you can only add the 1, which kinda sucks because the biggest PC 133 RAM stick that I have is 256. So we pop that on there, she's full. And we're maxing her out at 512 megs. But for anything that I'm possibly gonna use this board for, I think that's plenty. Now, of course, with this absurd board is gonna come an absurd case. And I have this thing. It was another little oddity I added to my collection. This might not seem as much of an oddity, but this wasn't a very common case design that I saw back then. You know, micro ATX cases, I guess they existed, but they were mostly in the partner PC space. This was branded. It used to have a label that said Mycore, and that seems to have fallen off, but I thought this case was cute and interesting. It is actually pretty small. I'm not sure if the camera's doing it justice. By today's standards, it might not seem that small, but by those standards, this thing was teeny tiny. By the time we got aftermarket cases in this size factor, that was about the same time they started turning more interesting colors like gray and black. Also, what do we have here? It's very short is the one thing that you notice about it, but it's also fat. It has a removable drive cage, not much room. Your hard drive is pretty much gonna get squished right up against your floppy. The intake's down here, it's like a 60 mil, 80 mil exhaust. The rear or other side panel has this weird way of coming off because it's like connected in there in 3 different dimensions where you gotta kind of pry one edge and then pull it over all awkwardly and then kind of fuss and fiddle with it. But then eventually it does come off. But that would be a perfect case for this build. I think they'd go together like peanut butter and jelly. Ironically, I guess this is kind of a peanut butter color and this is kind of a jelly color. I have a 300 watt Hewlett Packard power supply that did come out of a partner PC, so that'll do nice. I'm just gonna go ahead and start building on this and we'll see what happens. Oh, and did I mention, at one point in time, pretty much all motherboards had the same generic backplane layout. So even if you had an old motherboard like this and you lost the backplane for it, well, chances are, if you're like me, you got one compatible in scrap. And of course, best I could tell, this thing also came with its cooler. Look at that guy. That looks like nothing today, but back in those days when you got something with a beast like this on it, ho ho ho. And this thing's heavy, like it is a nice solid chunk of copper. And I guess you needed this back then because this is when processors started really amping up their wattage. This Duron's rated for up to a 57 watt TDP, so you needed a little bit more cooling than the typical little dinky dongles they had back then. Definitely did not need a lot of TIM back then. Hey! And you know, because of how simple this mount was, cooler pretty much just bolts directly on. And there you have it, buds. Complete. This is how we did things back in the day. When you had big clunky ribbon cables to manage, yet you still wanted it to be cavernous. When a Globwin NCB fan was one of the best you could get, before the name brands chimed in. Before the days of cable mods, when you tucked cables every which way you could. Back before the days you could put wires behind the motherboard tray, and you had to put wires behind the motherboard itself. When clearances were tight, and your creativity had to be tighter. In days when you needed nimble fingers and a nimble mind. Before building a really nice computer was a pay-to-win game. Cable management was a real art. And I know this looks nothing special to you. This thing doesn't look anywhere near as beautiful as the builds today. But trust me, for the standards of the time, your buddies would be impressed with this. And ironically, when it's all said and done, you put the side cover on it, and then you have nothing to show for anymore. But at least you have the peace of mind of knowing that you tried, right? So here we are in Windows 98. This board has full Windows 98 support, and I don't know, it's pretty fast as far as Windows 98 machines go, so I'm wondering if this might take a certain crown. Let's find out. At any rate, I have onboard video on right now, and I'm gonna go ahead and play a little bit of Half-Life to see what it can do. This is an older game, so it should be able to run it, right? It's set to Direct3D 800 by 600. As you can see, our load times are decent, but the textures look a bit funny. Now this does not feel responsive. It feels really laggy. Now's when we have the helicopter come in, and that thing's gonna blow at me from the other side. This bogged right down on the Pentium Pro system. I guess it's passable, but at 8x6 it sucks. Maybe we need to dumb it down a scotch. 640 by 480 is not acceptable for a system of its era. Oh, okay then. Well, you know what? In the spirit of absurdity, I have an idea. What you say we pop the old Voodoo 2 in there? See what that can do. After all, the onboard VGA is about as good as VGA cards were back then. That's like no gaming balls we're seeing right there. What happens if we give it some gaming balls? We'd expect the onboard of this newer system to be better than this old. Oh, does it have a year on here, sir? A 1998 video accelerator in a 2003 system. Just simply jump this pupper over, right? Oh, doesn't that look special now? Special indeed. Let us see what the Voodoo 2 can really do. Let's get ambitious. 8.6 OpenGL. Oh boy. Now all these special effects, they weigh down your processor pretty good. Or I should say, they weigh down your video processor really good. It's not the best looking, but it's night and day. The response is tight, and it feels like the FPS is up there. Ooh. What's shooting at me down there? I don't know, I guess this is pretty acceptable. I don't like how the combat feels though. Shoot while climbing a ladder, really? Loading's pretty slick. Oh. So there's a lot going on here, and it's having no trouble. I'm just kind of speed running here to see how the system handles all this. What the? These guys. Well, I don't quite remember my way around this place, but damn. Oh, she's running toasty. Not super toasty though. The thing doesn't even have a heatsink. But that just goes to show what the Voodoo 2 can really do when it's got a good processor. Half-Life used to run like crap on the Voodoo 2 back in my Pentium Pro days, but it seems there was a CPU bottleneck, and it's not actually the Voodoo 2 that's at fault. How about this Unreal game I was trying to play the other day? Well, yeah, that appears to boot up like nothing. Oh. Well then. Yeah, we're at 8.6. Look at this guy go. Well, we know that this is a Voodoo 2 era game, so there should be no problems here. Except for my playing. Oh. Yeah, this is smooth. This is smooth. That's the way this game was meant to be played. Wait, that's an NVIDIA slogan. Damn. Uh-oh. What's this? Yeah, like those lights are that high wattage enough that they need all their individual relays. Okay, I can't see a damn thing. Oh. Wait, he's behind me. What an epic way to introduce a new enemy. If you defeat our guard, we'll unlock your cage. This is a pretty flying, fast-paced game here. I just speed ran past someone. Oh, that's no good. Don't speed run so fast, bud. Oh, look at that, I can still... Oh yes, look at this nice gun. Let's pivot all around it. Well, what do you know? Add a bit more processor to the Voodoo 2 and it's surprising what it can do. Now let's try a much newer game. Clive Barker's Undying. It's a Clive Barker horror story in a 3D shooter. And this game, running on the Athlon 500 with the Radeon 9000, it barely cut it. It barely cut it. So this game's a little bit more enduring to the processor. Oh, she's got the chops, bud. She's got the chops. And this isn't even a particularly hard area to render. Oh. Direct 3D. Okay, there's our problem right there. Change driver. Oh, it's got to log out of the game. Yes, we'll go to glide. Now, there are limitations to the Voodoo 2. It can only support 800 by 600 at 16-bit color. I don't know if there's a version that supports 32-bit color, but I know if you want more resolution, that's when you need to SLI 2 cards. Voodoo 2 had SLI. We'll set the quality to medium. I don't get what desired FPS is though. We'll go around here. Oh wow. It's smooth right now. Oh yeah. Oh. Ah. The heck was that all about?
What are you doing here?
Just tell me where that trail heads off to.
Bethany used to go horseback riding in the hills, but that was so long ago.
How's the loading time? Oh, pretty good. Oh, looks like they have breast physics on this woman. Dog woman. I don't know. So I'm using some period correct hardware in here. You know what? I would imagine the game to be chopping up right now. But it doesn't look bad and it is quite playable. Like, I am impressed. This is a much newer game. This is a game that I would not have expected the Voodoo 2 to run, but it's no problem. Invoke. Wonder what all these spells do, I don't know. Ah, yes, and if I recall the game correctly, this is where you spend the next few hours exploring tombs. Well, that is rather impressive if I say so myself. What happens if we really try to punish this card? Max Payne, 2001. We'll know with the very intro whether or not this card can handle this game. I recall that game running crappily on my Voodoo 3, and then it didn't pick up until I got my GeForce 2. But again, that was on an Athlon 500. Well, it's good to know that old Asus CD-ROM still works. The install gets hung up on this, so I don't have high hopes. Now, something I'm curious about is older DOS-based games. These games tend to like to communicate directly with the sound card and don't work properly in Windows, at least more modern Windows. But Windows 98 and 95, if I recall correctly, had built-in DOS emulation. If that's true, this solves a lot of problems, because it means I can play DOS games on this box too, without DOS or an ISA card. Now, one big test of it is the Duke Nukem 3D. So if I recall correctly, for sound effects, we'd use something along the lines of a Sound Blaster, specifically a Sound Blaster Pro or 2.0. And then 515220 should be good. And if we test it, oh, there we go. And then for music, we would use General MIDI 330. That sounds rough. nowhere near as good as the AWE32. Oh, we crank up the VESA mode, and this should work. Oh yeah. Oof. That music sounds out of place. Hey, go down. Holy frig, bud. What? Oh, I forgot that they have jet cars. Yeah.
Hail to the king, baby.
Ah. For fun time, click this button. Or all four of these buttons. Or wait. A code.
Come get some. Shake it, baby.
Oh boy.
Shake it, baby. Come get some.
Ah, yes. And the classic strippers. Duke Nukem dancers.
Shake it, baby.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that game works. That's good news. I don't know, man. There's a couple bugs to work out, but this might take the crown for the ultimate Windows 98 machine for me, even with that old Voodoo 2. And it only gets better from here. Now, this video card isn't exactly period. It's a Radeon 9550, and it's the fastest thing I have in AGP. It actually wouldn't run on the Athlon system because of the extra notch in there wouldn't let it seat. But it'll run fine in this system. I don't even need to pull the Voodoo 2. It can run in tandem with it if I want. Now, this is what I would regard as being a 2000 era system. Windows 2000, that is. And fortunately, Windows 2000 supports dual boot. So I can install Windows 98 and 2000 on the same drive, on different partitions. And that's exactly what I did to get that benefit. So not to beat a dead horse, but I'm gonna pop this game back in there again and see if there's a difference in quality. So Direct3D 32-bit 1024 by 768. Actually, let's go all the way. Let's go to 1280 by 1024. And then all this is cranked. Good. That feels pretty good, actually. My mouse sensitivity's a bit high. Or maybe that's it so fast. I almost want to say the texture quality looks a bit better too, but it's hard to say. Either way, it's running quite nice. Let's go back to the gardens where I found it was just a little bit more taxing. I think I might feel a bit something strange in here. Let's see this guy's face when this...
What can you tell me about Lisbeth?
I've seen her. I've seen poor Elizabeth on the heather.
When?
I was coming back to the manor one evening, and I saw a silhouette perched atop a hill. At first, I thought it was a banshee, but I caught a glimpse of her face by the family mausoleum. It was Lisbeth, poor dear.
Family mausoleum?
It's to the west of the main house, through the trees.
Is that near the standing stones by chance?
Standing stones, you have no need to go out there. There's nothing but bad luck and suffering for all who visited that island. I'll unlock the gate to the outer grounds, but I assure you that venturing out to the standing stones will lead to no good.
To be honest, I guess the textures look about the same. Well, no, they do look slightly better. I'll still call this game very playable in the Voodoo 2. But of course, it's gonna be better with more power, right? And this processor has no problem doing this game. Oh, well, some action. Hey, maybe I'm a better shot with this rendering system. Aye. Or maybe not. Aye. Oh, I think I feel frames dropping. And I'm getting my ass handed to me. I just can't seem to hit these guys. Oh well, that's a good enough demonstration. Now, if I was doing more formal evaluations of hardware, which I am not, I would probably write down these numbers, which I didn't. But in this case, this system with Windows 2000 and that video card are going to be more than capable of running good old 3D Mark 3D 2001. 3D Mark 3D 2001? Oh, is that a new version? And indeed they are, with what appears to be some decent FPS so far. I'll tell you one thing, I do not miss the whine of these old school hard drives. There's a Quantum Fireball 40 gig in there. For the most part, other than that video card, this system's period correct. Dry Gothic looks like it's running pretty decent. Ah. Lobby, high detail. We're dipping down in the frame rate a little bit. It ran fine at the other detail setting. You know, it's surprising. This is a low-end card of the era. About 2004, 2005, I think this card's from. Maybe 2003. Yet, it can still get pwned by older games because it is a lower-end card. Ooh, this is not looking so good right here. All that foliage moving around. Now, is that CPU or GPU? Well, according to this, the 9550 is not that much newer than the 9000. And this is suspicious. 4381, I swear I got something in the 8000 range and the 9000 on the Athlon 500. But yeah, this is a nice little system. It's a bit louder than I'd like. Maybe a little bit of tuning and water cooling can quiet it down, but as far as a retro gaming rig goes, like this is, not too bad. Not too bad. It seems it has the ability to do everything my Athlon 500 build can do, but better. The only thing the Athlon 500 build can do better is DOS support, because it has the AWE32 sound card. Obviously, I can't put one of those in here because there's no ISA slot, and a PCI sound card is just going to give me the same functionality as the one that's built in. I would have to depend on Windows for DOS support. Now, full disclosure, I did have some sound glitches. Shadow Warrior, for some reason. I keep trying to showcase that game, but something on it always glitches. And for some reason, sound dies when I try to run that game. Reset the system, Doom and Duke Nukem 3D work fine, but then I try to run Shadow Warrior again and I might have sound for a little while, but then it goes away. I don't know what's going on with it. Either way, for everything else that era, assuming it's on original disk that I can't run on a newer system, hey, why not? Now, of course, I would expect this to run Max Payne fine. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and turn up a little bit of settings here. Well, yeah, maybe I'll try a little bit of anti-aliasing. And I'm gonna run Max Payne and just kick back and watch its intro. hope you found this entertaining. A nice little another delve into some old retro hardware. And I have a few more of these that I'm planning on doing. So stay tuned.
Standby 1010, investigated reported disturbance at Acer Plaza.
10-4 dispatcher, verify address.
That's Acer Plaza, repeat, Acer Plaza.
Shots fired on the rooftop. An assault in progress at Acer Plaza. Repeat, an assault in progress. It's a war zone down here. 1085 dispatcher, need additional units. Additional units now. Officer in danger. Officer in danger.
10-5, please repeat, 10-5, all units, emergency. Officer in danger, Acer Plaza, repeat, Acer Plaza, all units.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over. To make any kind of sense of it, I need to go back 3 years. Back to the night the pain started.
Oh, it looks like it crashed. Well, I'm gonna have to take back some of what I said about it.